Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session on building effective data science teams. I'm so happy to see you all here. We'll have a host of fantastic speakers. Each one will have 20 minutes today. That includes question if time permits. And it is my great pleasure to welcome the first speaker, Daniel Woodie, up to the stage. Please come in.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I have to start this off with a little story. Actually, last week I was having a meeting with my manager, and we were doing like a performance review check-in. And he had lots of positive feedback about, how I'm building this prototyping competency within Lily, and I've done a great job with coming up with like an operating model and having metrics for the team and setting the direction. But he gave me some feedback too on things to improve on. And the thing to improve on is my presentation skills. And so this is a great opportunity to put some of that to work. So that was Tuesday of last week, and then Wednesday of last week I get on LinkedIn, get on the internet, and I see this, must-haves for this conference is my talk, and then this company put out a top 10 and put my talk as number 1, and I was like, we need to level set a little bit here, guys. So yeah, just putting that out there. So thanks everyone for coming to the talk today. Here's the rough agenda. So I'll be going over why to build a prototyping capability. Something I've put together, I'm calling the Statistical Sciences Hierarchy of Needs, based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm going to walk through our process a little bit, how we define a prototype, how we operate as a team, and lessons learned. And one thing I'll point out is when I say like we as a team, it's me and one other guy. We are a very scrappy operation. So yeah, which I like. We're able to deliver real fast. So yeah, on the topic of why to build a prototyping capability, they're useful and quickly vetting new ideas. So I work in pharma in the stats department, and innovation can be hard in that group, and a lot of it is there's just a fear of risk-taking, and having the prototyping capability allows you to quickly vet new technologies that you may want to explore, and it really provides an accelerator to the broader strategy for the organization. And so yeah, it's incredibly valuable for elevating the conversation, not just with your team, but with leadership, because a lot of times they like to go big and it slows them down, whereas going small allows them to, test out these new ideas in kind of a risk-averse way. Yeah, so the statistical sciences hierarchy of needs. If you've seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's based on that, obviously, which is a schema or framework for kind of finding fulfillment and being healthy. And when applying it to our organization, this is kind of my latest draft with it. It's always kind of updating, but yeah, for us, we have IT infrastructure at the foundation of it, which can be kind of foreign, I think, to people that are traditional statisticians. But yeah, it is kind of the bedrock for everything else that we do. And having that value and perspective is kind of critical to progress in the other layers. And so, once you have something in place or strategy in place for moving IT infrastructure forward, then you can start to look at like your tools and your capabilities. And so for us, the tools are building R packages, Shiny applications, and on the capability side, it's we work with drug development teams, and so we're working on clinical trials. And so it's kind of taking those tools and using them for those product teams. And then beyond that, we also have training. And so once you have kind of your tools narrowed down, then you're looking at, okay, how do you upskill the organization, which is a big task. And then beyond that, we have the prototypes team. And so with the prototypes team, like I've said, we're an accelerator. And so we're working in IT infrastructure, we're working in the tools and capabilities, and we're even testing out new training modalities. And our job is really to make those lower levels kind of work in harmony better. And then at the top, you have self-actualization, or just everything working in the direction you want it to. So that is kind of our North Star, if you will. So our process, very simple. I point this out because a lot of times people can get lost in technology and say, oh, I've got, this new hammer, and then they just go and find the nails, but, that may not be the best way to start out. And so, obviously, find the problem. Once you have the problem, solve it in some way. That could be with some new technology. That's our lean on it. Beyond that, get paid / reduce cost. And then lastly, refine and repeat. So that's our that's kind of how we stay practical, I guess, with all of our solutions. One example prototype, walking through or framing it in that same way. So one issue if you've built Shiny applications is that they will freeze when running a long-running job. And the application will just stop working. And so the solution to that is to use or to enable asynchronous processing. There's a variety of ways to do that. So at Lilly, there's a great developer, Will Landau. He's made a number of tools. One is Crew, which helps to facilitate spinning up independent workers and running a job from an existing R session. And so we put together a basic prototype to see, could this solve our problem? And if so, what does that look like? So we built it on our, in this case, we didn't necessarily get paid, but it does drive impact by making the applications more usable and broadening our impact. And then lastly, on the step for refining and repeating, it was open sourced and people continue to build on it. And the direction our team has gone has been to enable offloading those independent workers into new compute environments. So that's how we iterate. And so on the topic of what is a prototype, it's important to define what your finish line is, because you don't just want to blindly be going out and building a prototype and without much direction or aim, kind of just continuing to iterate. And so for us, the finish line is typically, either it's a pre-specified set of features. Oftentimes it's a guidance on go or no-go for future development. Or in that same vein, providing the guidance on, okay, if you want to mature the software, what would that take to move it to the next stage? And moving on, so this is a scorecard that we've put together as a team to define what those other stages look like. And so in the leftmost column, you have the software maturity stage. So we end up spending most of our time in the POC or functional prototype, but then you can move on to alpha or beta releases where you're broadening out that end user group, or eventually taking it on to production software where people are using it to make important decisions. And so going from that leftmost column, moving over, we have things like having end user testing, the documentation, more unit testing, integration testing, and working with IT as well. But yeah, like I said, we spend most of our time in the POC to alpha or beta release. And then when it comes to moving things on to production, usually we'll simply provide the guidance and start working with the teams for a handoff or something like that. All right. And so moving on to how we operate as a team. So again, it's just me, James, the other guy. We check in daily. We don't have a project manager. We project manage ourselves. And typically, we're working on 2 to 3 prototypes at a time. And they take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to complete. As far as setting goals as a team, we use the objectives and key results framework. And so every quarter, we kind of set some big picture goals. For example, one is to complete 10 prototypes in the next quarter as a team. And that allows us, it's a good mix of kind of long and short-term goals. So we have 3 months to work on those prototypes, but then we have a lot of flexibility in between in defining what those prototypes are, what teams or groups we're working with. Yeah, another thing we do is we make our goals widely available, and at those quarterly check-ins, we meet with a lot of the sponsors for the team or the stakeholders and reset the goals. We make our goals widely available, so anyone can look at them, provide input to them. Yeah, and then lastly, this is a fun one, or at least I think it's a fun one. We also do a retrospective, and we do something called a fear setting exercise. I saw it in a TED Talk and tried it out, and we've done a few now. And we did this fear setting. So it's, if you haven't seen it or heard about it, it's kind of the opposite of goal setting. Yeah, which I think scared my manager when I first pitched it. Yeah, so fear setting, it's useful for someone like me. So I'm very optimistic, but I also like taking risk. And so that can be trouble because those anxieties, or like that voice in your head saying like, no, don't do it, can be useful. And so the fear setting kind of facilitates that. So what we'll do is we'll talk about ways that our group, like something could go wrong. Or, one example would be like, we start working with a certain team and, they want to use all of our resources. And so we can't really work on the other stuff. So, that's a big fear. We don't just want to be a shop for like one team. And so, going beyond that fear, it's not just like we talk about them and then we get paralyzed by them. Then we talk about, okay, what if that did happen? What do we do? Or, yeah, what can we introduce maybe to our goals to make sure that that kind of thing isn't happening? So, yeah, and another fun part of that is, like I said, I lean towards more like being optimistic, and there's definitely some, I don't know, there's people that are on the other side of that spectrum, more cautious, more anxious, a lot of fears, and it's fun to recruit them because I rely on that because I'm like, honestly, I don't even know I have a blind spot. I don't know what my fears should be. And so, yeah, relying on them is really valuable. And the guy I'm thinking about, I was skeptical. I was like, I don't even know if he's going to want to join this, but he had a blast and keep showing up to him. So, yeah. Alrighty. And lastly, just to share some of the lessons learned. Like I mentioned earlier, conversation around innovation will be elevated. I think it's in the spirit of organizations transitioning from waterfall to agile, but instead of taking gigantic, multi-year projects that have a lot of risk and you can balance that with doing smaller projects, testing the waters, learning more about it, and lifting up the entire conversation, both on the development side and within leadership. Let's see, so you will fail often, but more than make up for it with reducing cost and accelerating learning. I think as a team, this is going to sound strange, but I wish we failed more. And I think my manager has said we should fail more. And we do fail, but I think when you're failing more, you're taking, you're pushing the boundaries more. And so that's an important part of it. And beyond failing, obviously you're learning from those prototypes. As I mentioned earlier, it's a very small team. I really think you can do a lot with a small, scrappy team, especially in that earlier phase for software maturity. When you're talking about production software, there's more important things than moving fast necessarily. You want reliability and quality with a lot of that stuff. It's harder to move faster with a big team. And also with older, more mature software, it's harder to make the updates. So that's where having prototypes is really valuable. Next, I'd say iteration is not just for software. It's really good for metrics as well. So earlier I mentioned one of our metrics or goals is to complete 10 prototypes a quarter. And some of you may have listened to that and said, well, that's not a really good metric. And it's one we work on too. So there's certainly different flavors of what that metric could be. Right now it's a good volume. We're adjusting it, but one thing that has come out of this is that those metrics need to be updated. We revisit them on a quarterly basis, but it's good to have that flexibility to iterate on metrics as well. Next, spending some time with your fears is incredibly valuable. I think, I shared earlier how it's good for people that lean towards being more optimistic. But I think it's also good for people that spend more time with their anxieties because it kind of forces people to go, from those fears to like, okay, let's say it does happen, then what? And you're not just stuck in that, cycle of thinking about what could potentially go wrong. Experimenting early and often is a huge accelerator. Can't emphasize that enough. And then lastly, I would say statisticians are becoming software developers. That's a big narrative within our organization. And having the prototypes team exist to bridge that gap is very valuable. I think we're key to testing and vetting the new ideas, new technologies, new processes that the rest of the organization is starting to test the waters with, and we get to be the guinea pigs to share those learnings out. So, all right, well, that is all I have. So thank you, everyone, for coming to the talk today.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yep.
We will have time for a single question. And so it must be really tempting to keep working the prototype to production. How do you decide when enough is enough?
That is a great question. We haven't been forced that yet. When to decide when to move like a prototype to production. So a lot of it ends up coming. So we'll provide, like I said, a go or no-go decision, and then we'll do some evaluation on like, okay, you want to take it to the next phase? here's what that would take. And our team really isn't set up for supporting, the QA process with IT, monitoring infrastructure, things like that. So, yeah, I think having that conversation early and upfront is important, because that's definitely the direction it would go. And we don't want to be a team that is just supporting the production software. It stops us from accelerating those conversations. So,
fantastic. Thank you again, Daniel.
Yep. Thanks.